Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Burn Your Boats podcast. It is me today on my own. As you know, when we are on our own, we tend to bring topics to you that are short, hopefully 10 minutes or less. And we just look into the zeitgeist. We look into what's going on today, into the conversations that we're having, into the news articles, and we try and bring you something actionable. I would try and bring you something that you can use in 10 minutes or less. And so today I'm going to talk about the art of decision making. And I'm going to lay it into the scenario and the environment that we find ourselves in right now. You see, I've seen it time and time again that the key difference between successful people and those who struggle to be successful or just get left behind is their ability to make decisions in all market environments. So I'd like to kind of unpack this decision making skill. Like, what is it? But let's start off with the facts of the matter. Right now, a blind man can see that interest rates are high, mortgage rates are trending higher. The bond market has had quite a run as of late as the House and Senate are grappling with this new funding bill. And the bond market tries to send signals to our leaders about ever increasing national debt. And so there is no light on the horizon with interest rates or mortgage rates coming down anytime soon. So everyone can see that. Okay. Layering on top of that, we've got new housing market dynamics. Some regions of the country are definitely seeing fluctuations in home prices. Some regions of the country are definitely experiencing a cooling market due to clearly increased housing inventory, stabilizing demand, and less buyers, quite frankly, out there. And so we also have maybe a settling down or a reversion to the norm after remote work. You know, there is the type of movement in the marketplace is probably settled down now. The people who can work remotely are probably working remotely, and the people who can't are probably gone back to the office at this point in time. And so I'm sitting here as a private lender, and I see very clearly people who are completely unfazed by what I've just told you. And then I see other people who are absolutely paralyzed by fear and inaction by exactly the same information. Now, I'm inside developer groups and mastermind groups where I see this unfolding as well. If you are a developer and you're looking at a 1 year or 2 year or 3 year project right in front of you, given what I've just said, it's very, very difficult to make a long-term decision. If you are a buy and hold investor, on the other hand, none of this matters at all, other than the fact that you can get the best deal that you've probably been able to get in years right this minute because the market dynamics are in your favor. And then obviously we've got other people who are in the fix and flip world. And whilst they're not long in their decision making, they're much shorter than a developer. And I see people in that world walking away, and I see other people ramping up. And so it's really intriguing to me. But what is the difference between these people? The people who are unable to make decisions and hiding in a box, and the other people who are making more money, quite frankly, than they've made in years. And I can only boil it down to it's their skill. It's their decision making skill. How they make choices confidently and effectively is something that they have developed, and it's something you can develop. And I've just noticed that successful folks tend to they just get good at it. They don't overthink it. I have sent deals to borrowers of mine that I have seen, and I might personally prevaricate over a deal. And I'll say, hey, listen, do you want to take a look at this? You're a good borrower. Maybe I'll fund this deal, because if I fund their deal, I'm essentially taking a much less risky approach than they are. And yet I'll send over a deal, and within 5 minutes, they'll come back and say, yeah, cool, send me over a contract. So what is the difference? What is the secret to their success? And really it boils down to just they're not paralyzed by indecision. That's what it is. So why do so many people struggle making decisions? I think a lot of it just comes down to fear, right? For some people, it's the fear of being wrong. It's the fear of failing. Or even for others, it might be just how they might be judged if they make a wrong decision. What if they make the wrong call, and then your wife, your husband, your siblings think that you're incompetent, and they kind of start layering their decisions as a reflection of who they are in the big bad world. It's funny, isn't it, how gamblers will tell you about their wins, but they won't tell you about their losses. It's a little bit like that. I think great decision makers aren't going around telling the world about all their losses or all their wins, quite frankly. I think that's just ego based. Like, if you are afraid to make decisions, because you're afraid of being wrong, or conversely, if you only want to make decisions that are perfectly right so that you can stroke your own ego with your ability to pronounce to the world that you've been successful. Look, I would say that we all have this innate desire to appear smart and confident. And sometimes we'd rather hide then, therefore, behind hesitation or delay rather than risk making a mistake. I'm telling you now, successful people do not have that veneer of ego holding them back. I've just seen it over and over again. So the people who are great decision makers, they just tend to have less or no ego attached to their choices. They're okay with making a decision because they see it as part of the learning process. They're not, personally defined by their decisions. If something doesn't work out, they learn, pivot, and they try again. And they do that super quickly. They don't sit on it. They don't beat themselves up for a year over a bad decision. The great decision makers, they just move so quickly beyond their good decisions and their bad decisions. And they just don't let their ego get bruised along the way. They understand that mistakes they're just stepping stones. Another obstacle I see is that a lot of people just need more information. It's almost like an excuse, in my view. Well, I just need a bit more data before I can decide, or let me wait until I feel a little bit more certain. You know, I'll agree with that to a point. You know, we all need the right information, but you will never have all the information. And so, if it's more information you need, please clearly identify what it is you need to know, and then go find out that thing you need to know, and then make a decision. But again, I've seen so many people over the years just unable to make great financial decisions. And they're just hiding behind the idea that they need perfect information to make a perfect decision. But here's a catch: no decision is ever completely certain. I was in a room very recently with a bunch of multimillionaires and billionaires, and we went around the room, and everybody in that room talked about how many deep scars they have from years and years of doing business and making decisions. And the bottom line is if you want to be successful, you're going to get a lot of stuff wrong. And that's just the way it is. So look, no amount of extra information is going to make your choice 100% safe or foolproof. Sometimes you just need to trust your instincts, take the leap, and do the thing. And honestly, that's the core decision making, trusting yourself enough to go with what feels right. So while accepting that imperfection and uncertainty are part of the process, you have to accept that you don't have a crystal ball and nobody else does. The people who put themselves up there as know-alls or they've got all the information, they probably don't. However, people who've repeated the same thing over and over and over and over and over again probably do because they're not doing something for the first time. And I think that's really it. The best decision makers, they're willing to accept risks. They're able to learn from just whatever happens next, but they keep on moving. And it's in that movement, it's in that velocity that they get to do the thing. And whatever mistake they made the last time, they won't make it this time. If they overpaid last time, they're not going to overpay this time. If it was, a little bit out of their wheelhouse, they're not going to do that deal again. If it was too far away, they're not going to do that deal again. If one of their contractors didn't work out, they're not going to use that contractor again, and so on and so on. So if you find yourself hesitating, here's a little reminder. The fear of being wrong is often worse than the actual mistake that you're afraid of. Because the mistake you're afraid of is part of the growth. It's required to make mistakes to grow because there is no perfect, right? Decision makers, right? They move the needle. Waiting for perfect clarity is unusually just delaying progress and feeding into that fear and delivering failure. So here's a pro tip. At the moment, we're all facing really tough decisions out there. Our time is ticking away. We're 3 or 4 years into a tricky market, to say the least. There's some builders out there that are giving incentives, but is that where you want to be investing long term? Just because you're getting an incentive now, is that a great 30-year decision? But look, here's the pro tip. When you're facing a tough decision, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? Because sometimes the reality isn't as scary as the story we tell ourselves. And I'm not even going to say sometimes, it's every single time. I have been asked over the years, but what if this, David? What if that? What if this? What if that scenario? And now I refuse to answer the what if question because it's all I'm talking to is their inner child, you know, the people who are afraid of this or afraid of that. The bottom line is there are mechanisms for almost everything. And the things we fear the most, you know, my flip went wrong, or I couldn't sell my flip at the end of the process, or my contractor left and, ran away with $30,000, or my borrower defaulted, or there's just mechanisms for all of these things. And quite frankly, the bottom line is if you are doing things, these things almost never happen in the first place. So remember, please, that all successful people, they don't get it perfectly right either, right? But they get it more right every little iteration. Every time they do something, they get it that little bit more right than they did before. Now, it's not like that they can't see the market in front of them. It's not like they don't have to pivot. It's not like they don't have to change their underwriting. But what sets them apart is their willingness to decide and act, regardless of the uncertainty. They're just not crippled by fear or ego. They're confident in their ability to handle whatever comes. So, my challenge to you today, the listeners, next time you're stuck in indecision, recognize that that indecision is perfectly normal. But please, I beg you, don't let it hold you back. Practice trusting your gut. Accept that mistakes are part of the learning process, and remember that decisive action often leads to the greatest growth. As I look at my own lending business here in the state of Florida, and I'm aware that the market is softening, but equally, I can see the deals my borrowers are getting, and these are the best deals I've seen in years. So those borrowers see something in themselves. They see something in the marketplace, and they're able to make decisions. So look, I hope that you can adjust your underwriting. I hope that you can look out at the horizon right now and see it for what it is. I use the term the sheep in the field and the wolf in the forest. The bottom line is for me as an investor, the last 4 years have been extremely uncomfortable, as I've seen more and more inexperienced investors get into the market. I've seen prices rise beyond what the underlying assets are worth or the rents are. I have seen issues with people overpaying, and they're beating me out on my contracts all of the time. And so the last 4 years have been very, very difficult for me. And I was faced with a lot of indecision over the last number of years when the market was at its zenith, when the market was at its highest point, when it was at its most buoyant, was when I was most fearful. And as the days roll by now, and I see more and more of that fluff getting wiped away, and I see more reality coming into the market, I mean this sincerely. I haven't been this optimistic about the next year or two or three than I have in probably 7 or 8 or 9 years. And so don't get stuck in indecision. Please know that there are deals being done out there right now. It's so very easy to get onto the YouTubes and listen to people like Nick on the Reventure app every single night, taking data and misinterpreting it to his own ends. If it bleeds, it leads. And it is so easy to get caught up in those algorithmic negativity. I am here to tell you today that I'm not in the algorithmic negativity world. I'm in the world where I see people doing things. And quite frankly, my phone, from a borrower perspective, is ringing off the hook. Who are those borrowers and why are they still doing stuff? The reality is they're great decision makers. Thanks for joining me. I hope this was helpful. Let's move on. Let's make decisions, because you have only one life to lead. And quite frankly, we have what I call a window of opportunity, where you have the money, you have the energy, and you have the time to make a very big difference in your financial future. And that time, for most of you, is right now. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Look, we truly appreciate your support and hope you found the conversation insightful and engaging and useful. If you enjoy the show, because there's a lot of shows out there, would you please take a moment to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform? Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners. Don't miss the show. Please go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at contact@burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you and have a great day.